Welcome back into Bill's Chat. I am Josh McCarty. With me tonight, as always, is Luka. And Luka, we have finally made it to draft week. How are you doing tonight?
Fantastic. How can I not be fantastic? It is draft week. It is one of the best weeks of the year as a sports fan. I mean, NHL playoffs are kicking off in full effect. As of right now, I turned off my TV so I wasn't distracted, and it was the final 5 minutes of the insane Colorado Avalanche Winnipeg Jets game. That was bonkers. Last I checked, it was 7-5. I have no idea what's happened since. You have that going on. NBA playoffs, I know that's a little bit closer to you. Hasn't been as great as the NHL playoffs from what I've been following, but still, that's fun. But the cherry on top, the creme de la creme, everything that it is in this time of year, late April, we know what time it is. As NFL fans, it is the NFL draft, and it is truly the Christmas of spring. That is what it is, and it is fantastic.
I was talking to somebody at work. I think, football season is the best sports time of the year. I think September is really when sports are great. But I think a close second is April. You mentioned NBA, NHL playoffs, fantastic. Baseball is still in that like honeymoon period where it's still new and you're still like, oh man, like if you're a Yankee fan, I get to watch my Yankees every night. And then you all know how it goes. Like the summertime rolls around, and instead of it being appointment television, you kind of like maybe watch a game or two a week. And but then right now it's just it's a buffet. There's something for everybody. Golf is going on. So I mean, if you want it, you got it. And we got the NFL right now. And it is time, Luka, for our favorite episode we do. It's our third annual NFL mock draft. We will go until the Bills pick. And let me say this. This is how this episode's going to go. One, this is not what Josh and Luka would do with these picks. I think that's fun, but I don't know how well that plays for an audience. I think the audience at this point wants to know what's really going to happen, or at least what we think is going to happen. Two, Luka and I do an obscene amount of research on this episode because it allows us to expand our horizons, get out of this Bills bubble that we always live in, and really put ourselves in the shoes of these other teams. So I've been taking in a lot of content on the teams I'm going to be drafting, whether it's reading beat reporters, reaching out to people I know that are close to those teams. I feel really good about the teams I have. I have the odds. Luka has the evens, and when the Bills are on the clock, we will come to a decision together. So I hope that you all can appreciate that, like, we are really trying to put what we think is going to happen when these teams are on the clock. Nobody really knows. The third thing I will say, there are going to be no trades in our mock except for the Bills. We are allowing ourselves to move up if we want to, if we think it makes sense for the Bills. We will obviously talk about that. But when we're on the clock with the teams we are running, we will talk through why we think they could have moved up if they had the option to, or why they would be tempted to move back. If you have not been following the draft, if you feel like, oh my God, the draft is in 4 days and I need to crash course study, this is the episode for you. We will talk about all the top prospects. We'll talk about all the team needs. And no, this isn't just going to ESPN.com, pulling up the Falcons and seeing 3 positions listed and then going to the top 100 and picking the next. No, we've dove in, boots on the ground. We have a good feel for what these teams are going to do. And Luka, I'm fired up. I love this episode.
It's the best one for us as just football fans because, as you said, it's an unhealthy amount of research we do. The average individual, the average fan, even, we have other friends that, one of my closest friends that I know is, when fall's around, he is an addict, just like the rest of us kind of deal with NFL football. I know for a fact, I will not name this guy's name, but I know he does not dive in even remotely to the draft. He doesn't care. He just wants to see it break down the way it is. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we just love to truly expand what we know or what we understand with these other teams, because the fun, I feel like, out of it, the fun we get out of it, Josh, truly is, we do all of this kind of putting our ear to the ground, see what's going on with all of these other teams, try to feel out this mock draft that we build. And then on draft night, when we like to do our live show, this is going to be the second year of us doing it. That's when we get a live reaction and we can see truly how well we understood it. Or the most likely scenario is inevitably it all blows up in our face. We didn't really know what was going on. and or all the individuals or places that we were kind of trying to feel it out and see what it was didn't work out. You get a couple crazy, left field picks, whatever it might be, but it makes that experience even more enjoyable because you almost then at that point could maybe even get at an emotional level with, say, Jets fans, Chargers fans, whatever it is on that pick and in that situation, which just enhances the experience of watching draft night. So overall, I love this episode. I love this exercise we've been doing now for years. I'm very excited for tonight's, now with us opening the door of allowing a Bills trade. That's a first for us in this third year now that we're doing this. But it would have been a little too complicated if we did other teams trades. Maybe we do that in the future, because there's definitely ones that I know we've discussed off air where it's like a trade here feels inevitable. And we just didn't know where, because of course we are taking half each and so on and so forth. So logistically, it doesn't make sense for this episode. But yeah, overall, very, very excited for this one. It is one of our top 5 episodes every year when it comes to prep and everything like that, because we just cannot get enough of the draft.
And with that said, let's get this kicked off. The Chicago Bears are on the clock with the first pick in the draft. This is a pick that they got from the Carolina Panthers, who moved up last year to take their quarterback in Bryce Young. That is not going well. No offense to Bryce Young, but the quarterback taken after him, CJ Stroud, looks like a star already. And then the Bears are in position here with the first overall pick. Matt Eberflus is their head coach going into his 3rd season with his team. There was some thought that maybe they might move on from him this offseason. Kind of surprising they didn't when they had a chance to really reset their roster with this draft class, coming off a 7-10 season. But the defense did improve down the stretch, made some midseason trades, got Montez Sweat from the Commanders that really kind of reshaped that defense. They kept Johnson in-house, their cornerback, who was on the trade block. And I will say, Luka, for about 5 minutes this offseason, it seemed like a realistic possibility that they could move off this spot, because they do only have 4 picks in this draft. And there are some quarterbacks that teams would pay a king's ransom for, and maybe they would stick with Justin Fields. Maybe they saw enough out of Justin Fields, and they would take the king's ransom of picks and really boost up that roster. But they let us know pretty quickly in this offseason that wasn't the plan. They traded Fields away for peanuts to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, we can go through their needs, but this is the first pick in the draft. And I cannot remember, maybe since the Trevor Lawrence draft, where a quarterback has been number one, bell to bell, where there wasn't just like something that came out like, oh, maybe Drake May can knock him off the spot. No, from the time college football ended until today, it's been Caleb Williams at 1. And that is where I'm going to go with this Bears pick. Caleb Williams will get to throw the ball to Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, and they are hoping that he changes the fortunes of the Chicago Bears and gives them their first star quarterback, really, since Jay Cutler, if you want to call him a star. He was a Pro Bowl level player, but it's been a while, and he has a chance to be electric. Caleb Williams with the first overall pick.
It's what I even wrote down, even though I wasn't the one doing odds here. It's the no-brainer. It's the one that the NFL has just basically been telling the Bears to keep hush. This isn't the Matt Stafford or Sam Bradford days where you sign them and it's already known before the draft night even comes. It's an inevitable pick. It makes a lot of sense, Josh. Yeah, I mean, it's just, this is a draft where, as we keep going, I even said it to you right before we hit record, it feels early on where this is going to be one for teams that there could be temptation to do a thing here or there, but overall, just don't be stupid. And boy, would it be the most dumb thing if the Bears don't end up going with Caleb, to be honest. Okay. Washington Commanders are on the clock now. I'm done with my little rant there. This is an interesting situation for the Commanders, only because there's a couple options, and we've seen a lot of betting lines move recently where it feels like maybe the quote unquote somebody knows something crowd is like, there's true coin toss on what's going on. The one thing that's not a coin toss in the first year under Dan Quinn with the Commanders and everything like that is they need a franchise cornerstone at quarterback. Sam Howell is no longer there. He went to Seattle. Currently starting, if they just rolled into the season right now, is Marcus Mariota with Jeff Driscoll behind him, and then our good old friend Jake Fromm right behind him. Those aren't guys that you can build a team around. You still have Scary Terry. You still have Jahan Dotson, who they drafted last year, 2 years ago. Man, feels like just last year, 2 years ago now. You need a quarterback that can throw them the ball for the years to come. I just to pull it aside for a second, I believe Drake May is the next best quarterback. But where I just think this pick will inevitably go is quarterback Jaden Daniels out of LSU, formerly Arizona State. Jaden Daniels is the kind of guy that truly has scouts salivating at what he is capable of and what he's able to do, obviously running with the ball as well as passing. The one thing that I think puts him over the top is he's not the strongest of arms. It's not a weak arm either, but he's not the strongest of arms. He still, in my opinion, has probably the best deep ball in this draft. And that says a lot with Caleb Williams and what he can do and throw. But I think Jaden Daniels almost has this prime Russell Wilson Seattle deep ball where it's that moonshot that always drops in the basket that makes it very easy to catch for a receiver on the run or receiver on the go. It's what made Brandon Ayuk at ASU early on in Jaden Daniels' career successful, because Brandon Ayuk feeds off of those kinds of balls. Like, he has a long reach. He's able to keep it and run, everything like that. It's just Jaden Daniels has a lot to him where I believe that dual threat with a great deep ball, all of those things, he just, to the NFL personnel, he's going to move over the line. And it feels like Washington has kind of been trying to hide this "we really like Jaden" situation, because they, there's this controversy out there right now about Jaden thought it was going to be a one-on-one workout, and then he showed up and it was him and 20 others or what, 21 others, whatever it was, and he's not happy about it. I think that's a load of BS, to be quite frank. I think Jaden actually does have a little bit of a question mark when it comes to his personality. That's just my own bias. But overall, I don't think there's anything there. And I think Washington loves him so much that almost they were maybe bringing everyone else just to see how he'd handle that and then how he would stack up visually against everyone else. And I believe Jaden is still very good to the point where a Drake May wouldn't be able to win them over to the point where it is. So overall, it's hard for me to move off of that. And I believe Washington will end up turning in a card for pick number 2 to take quarterback Jaden Daniels out of LSU, formerly ASU.
Yeah, it's been feeling like, to me, that's the pick all along. And then you also compound that with Cliff Kingsbury being the offensive coordinator. He obviously had some success with Kyler Murray. Now, look, you've said this on our offensive preview podcast. We believe Drake May is capable of being that mobile quarterback. In a lot of ways, this Jaden Daniels, Drake May thing reminds me of Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, where Drake May, people are not respecting how mobile he can be. But I'm with you. I really like Jaden Daniels. I don't know who I would choose between these two. But you really hope this isn't a situation where, maybe a mistake on the visit where they invited all the quarterbacks at the same time ends up starting that relationship off on the wrong foot, because there is a stench on that Commanders organization right now that needs to be cleaned off, and hitting a home run with the second overall pick would certainly be a great start to get that done for Dan Quinn and the Washington Commanders. That puts the New England Patriots on the clock at pick 3. And Luka, it's weird. Bill Belichick will no longer be on the sidelines for the Patriots. They hired Gerard Mayo to be the head coach. And look, the reason why the Patriots have really floundered since Tom Brady left, it's not look, Tom Brady left, that's a big reason, but they have really failed to answer the quarterback issue. They took one swing with Mac Jones, but it was kind of a passive swing. Other quarterbacks were off the board, and they just took Mac Jones. I think this is a real opportunity for the Patriots to put their stamp on it and take a player like a Drake May. But I will tell you, we've talked about this off the air. It's no secret. The Minnesota Vikings acquired a second first-round pick in a trade with the Houston Texans. At the time, for those that don't know, Kirk Cousins is no longer a Viking. Their quarterback depth chart is basically Sam Darnold at this point. So they're going to get a quarterback. The worst kept secret in the league is Minnesota is going to aggressively attempt to get a quarterback on draft night. My thought is, you don't acquire that second first-round pick unless you already know who you're moving up with. I think a lot of people are thinking they're going to move up for J.J. McCarthy, the fourth quarterback off the board on most people's opinions, after the top 3 go. But it hit me today. What is this landing spot that New England has for a rookie quarterback that you're going to throw into the fire? Their left tackle right now is Connor McDermott. former Bills 9th and 10th offensive lineman, not even the good Bills, like the drought Bills. Connor McDermott couldn't start for them. He's penciled in at left tackle. And then you want to ask, okay, well, who would he be throwing the ball to? Let's just read their wide receiver depth chart. Kendrick Bourne, Demario Douglas, KJ Osborne, Juju Smith-Schuster, who had a very interesting week on TikTok, and Tyquan Thornton. So you start adding it all up. And yes, I totally understand the argument, and there's no trades right here, of just sticking and picking and being like, hey, we're not going to be this high in the draft. We love Drake May. Let's get our guy. And look, we're the Buffalo Bills fans. The Bills took Josh Allen and plopped him into a situation that was so far less than ideal. His number one receiver was Kelvin Benjamin. He had one offensive lineman worth anything in second-year player Deion Dawkins. It was a disaster. He made it work, and now the Bills are one of the gold standard teams in the league. But I could see a scenario where if the Vikings are willing to float that 11 and 23rd pick out there and maybe throw another sweetener in there, that's appealing to a team like the Patriots, who might take advantage of the tackle depth in this draft, the receiver depth in this draft, kind of restock the cupboard, get maybe 11 and 23 this year, get some value from next year, and really make next year the year they aggressively go up. Or maybe they go back, take a Bo Nix, but also get that tackle to go with them. We're not doing that here. With the third pick, the Patriots are going to take Drake May. It makes too much sense in a non-trade situation. Good luck. I think get your guy if you love him. I don't know what their grades are on it. If they love Drake May, go take him. I would very much advise them to let Jacoby Brissett take the heat early in the year while you're still sorting out. This is a deep tackle draft. This is a deep receiver draft. So they could still add some weapons and some blockers as we go. But hopefully, we're Bills fans. We love to see the Patriots struggle, but putting ourselves in their shoes, hopefully for their sake, they've learned from how little they did to support Mac Jones, hiring defensive coordinators and special team coordinators to run the offense, putting a joke of offensive weapons around him. Empower your quarterback, build around your quarterback. Hopefully they do that. Drake May comes off the board number 3 to the New England Patriots.
Yeah, just real quick. I do find it interesting bringing up the whole Minnesota dynamic. It would make a lot of sense. I think it's one where there's definitely some that believe that it would be possible and it would make sense. I just think at the end of the day for the Patriots, the decision you have to truly make is, as you even brought up late, what do you grade whoever's sitting there, whether it's Jaden or Drake May, and do you believe, because realistically, at the end of the day, quarterback is the first and foremost most important position in football, in most sports. And you have to almost had to have done your early research on next year's draft, because either this year or next year, you need to secure a guy you believe if you want to be successful. So is it worth trading back to you to get whatever it is, like you had painted a beautiful picture of? Or do you just take him? You're going to take your lumps with it, but believe in yourselves to, between the rest of the picks this year and going into next year, can you then, as you said, empower him, build around him, so on and so forth. So it will be a fascinating one to watch bright and early. Well, bright, nice and early in the draft with the Patriots and what they do there. So, all right. 4th overall, a pick that cannot come soon enough, Josh. I don't know if I need to do a ton of lead up on this one. It's one I will be very excited about come draft night. It's one that I had hoped that the Cardinals wouldn't have screwed themselves out of and could have been in that top 3 situation and just made sure it happened there. Luckily for them, the top 3 picks seem to be inevitably quarterback. However it shakes down, right? If Minnesota trades up with the Patriots, Minnesota trades up with Washington, if some craziness happened with that as well, whatever it is, it's going to be quarterback. So then the Cardinals are sitting there at 4. And there's been plenty of mocks out there that show Minnesota trading with the Cardinals at 4, or the Giants trading to the Cardinals at 4, whatever it might be. Look, reading the tea leaves, understanding where the Cardinals are. You are going into the second year with Gannon as your head coach. Things as bad as they were last year were still shockingly good. And that's unfortunately why they're picking 4, or fortunately, however you want to look at it. And Kyler came back, and for the first time, it felt like in years, I was even excited to see Kyler playing football, because it just was so much fun to watch. And shockingly, for how he is built, it looked like he was doing okay on that knee where he tore his ACL. So you have that, and you were being competitive. Gannon's trying to establish culture. They traded away one of their most dynamic weapons in Rondell Moore for a backup quarterback, essentially. And some people, by the way, believe that the Cardinals won that trade. Don't understand that one. But overall, the Cardinals have 2 picks in this year's first round, and they are sitting at 4 with the best player in the draft in their laps. If they have the audacity to trade back with this opportunity in front of them, I honestly will be irate on our live show. Shout out once again, Thursday night. We will be live on our YouTube channel. You take Marvin Harrison Jr. here. You do not think about it. You do not ponder what you could do if you traded back, what the offers are, because your phone will be very active. I imagine Osenfort, whatever his last name is, his phone is going to be very active. The Vikings, the Giants potentially. There's a lot of teams that could be looking up. I mean, dark horse, the Denver Broncos could be looking to trade up. And you just hang up those damn phones, unless one of them says, hey, we'll literally give you a franchise, but that's not going to happen. You take Marvin Harrison Jr., even if they do offer a franchise, because it's better than that. And you give Kyler Murray a true dynamic number 1 after trading away his number 1, although he was aging, for a second round pick, or cutting him. I can't remember what happened to Diop these days. You get Marvin Harrison Jr. and you don't look in the rear view mirror, because that is going to be franchise changing for the Arizona Cardinals, just like taking Larry Fitzgerald was at 3rd overall. I'm not calling Marvin Harrison Jr. Larry Fitzgerald, for what it's worth. He's got a long way to go to get to that level. But overall, he is the generational talent in this draft. He is the number 1 player on the board, and you do not move back when you have a lot of pieces elsewhere that you can then just plug and play with this and truly be competitive. Once again, it's an incredible opportunity that you just need to take advantage of. Signed, seal, delivered, wide receiver, Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State. He is an Arizona Cardinal.
It's so easy to say they should trade back and take the picks, and picks always look good on paper, but eventually picks are going to get picked. There was a time in Arizona Cardinals history where they went into a draft thinking we need an edge rusher and a wide receiver, and they traded back and compiled picks. They traded away from an edge rusher who's one of the safest edge rushers we've seen in a long time, Terrell Suggs, and they drafted Calvin Pace, who ended up having a nice career, and they drafted Bryant Johnson. Now, look, they saved themselves in the second round when they got Anquan Bolden, but the point is, you start looking at Bryant Johnson and Calvin Pace or Terrell Suggs. Like, I look at this draft, Luka, I think there are 5 blue chip talented players in this draft that aren't quarterbacks. These quarterbacks a different conversation. So the Cardinals are not a team that needs a quarterback. We don't think they're in the quarterback market. Clearly, Kyler Murray is very good. And this is where, if you trade down, you better be sure you don't miss out on one of these 5, because it is a lonely thing if you're like, I'm going to trade down to 11 with the Minnesota Vikings, and all of a sudden you get there and the top 3 receivers, Joe Alt, and they're not going to take Brock Bowers because they already have McBride off the board. Yep. And you're sitting there holding the bag. Dangerous proposition. I agree with you. Marvin Harrison is as safe as they come. Don't overthink this one. You lost Hollywood Brown. You lost DeAndre Hopkins the year before. Empower your offense. This guy is as safe as they come, and this pick makes a lot of sense. And, I think this is pretty chalky so far. There's some thought that the Cardinals could trade back. This is kind of where the draft starts. Another team that could trade back is who's on the clock at pick 5, the LA Chargers. They went out and hired Jim Harbaugh, the reigning national champion coach from Michigan. The last time Jim Harbaugh was in the NFL was from 2011 to 2014 with the 49ers. I think he is best known for being a run-heavy approach on offense. That certainly was the case in San Francisco and definitely carried over to Michigan. And I think there's a lot of thought of like, okay, well, under Jim Harbaugh, the Niners never used like a top premium pick on a wide receiver. They did spend the 30th pick on AJ Jenkins. That didn't really work out. Otherwise, all their top picks were defensive players. And then like second round, they sprinkled in some running backs. But that's where a lot of us are like, okay, will the Chargers really be willing to take a wide receiver at this spot? I think their preference here is to trade down. I really do. If the Cardinals don't take Marvin Harrison, whether they pass on him for somebody else or if they trade down and a quarterback goes here, I think the Marvin Harrison conversation to the Chargers is going to be too good for them to pass up on, especially if Malik Neighbors. Well, no, I guess in that situation, if the Cardinals were to take Malik Neighbors, then you really got to take Harrison, because now you're left with Adunze being the only other receiver left. And if you trade down too far, you're going to miss out. The Chargers traded away Keenan Allen this offseason. They cut Mike Williams, and Justin Herbert's left looking at a wide receiver room with Quentin Johnston, who did very, very little last year. And they also lost Gerald Everett for what it's worth. So in this situation, I think they would prefer to trade down, but we are not doing that. I reached out to our mutual friend who we very much respect as being in tune with the Chargers. I'm going to defer to what he told me. This is not the pick I would make if I were the Chargers, but this is what he did, because I do think there is a very good argument to make that the Chargers under Jim Harbaugh could just take Joe Alt and have one of the best tackle pairings in the entire league and not have their season go down the tubes if their tackle misses more games this year, because you would have an easy fill in Joe Alt too, and then you'd have bookends at right and left side. But our mutual friend who nailed the Quentin Johnston pick last year told you to take him over even Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison, and boy, were we right on that one.
Yep.
Has said if they can't trade down and the first 4 picks go like this, the Chargers are going to turn in Malik Neighbors. And he is going to be Justin Herbert's new go-to guy. And hello, fantasy football. That could be a lot of fun. The Chargers take Malik Neighbors 5th overall. And from a Bills perspective, Luka, 2 receivers gone in the top 5.
2 receivers gone in the top 5 from a Bills perspective. But overall, I don't think this would be surprising. This wouldn't be kind of like oh, damn, like this sucks. If Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. go in the top 5, you just go, yes, the draft is just going how you would expect. Or it again, we already have said it once. This is very chalky right now. Now, this is obviously in a no trade scenario because we are not trying to orchestrate trades here. We've even brought up teams and where we think trades could happen and how it could skew things a little bit differently here. Like we had said, if the Cardinals, for whatever reason, God, please don't trade back, and then if someone is going there to get a quarterback, then, the Chargers take Marvin Harrison Jr. and only 1 wide receiver's off. But realistically, how much would that change? Pick 6 is up, and it is the New York Giants. Let me start this real quick. The Giants were an interesting one because I do believe that there's a few different scenarios for them that are very, very intriguing. And I think you hit it right before we started recording very well. Dable feels like he's coaching for his job. And I think that puts teams and draft rooms into a weird predicament where you truly are focused on contributing now even more so than what can be done for you in the future and how you can build a roster and what you should always have in the mindset of when drafting. And it's a weird one where I could even see the Giants actively trying to trade into those top 3 and trying to get one of the top 3 quarterbacks, of course. But then also, if the top 3 go the way that we've painted them here, I can see a scenario where they trade back to try to really bolster the roster as well with more what they believe to be blue chip picks. This could be where the Vikings trade up to get their quarterback, and then they acquire a couple more firsts, and then maybe they get a quarterback in the 2nd round early on that they might have their eye on. We're not trading, and the Giants are stuck at 6. The phones just could not work out in their way.
None of the phones are working but the Bills.
Yeah. If the Giants' phones are not working and they are not looking to move in this scenario, and the draft board has worked the way that it is, Malik Neighbors is off the board. Marvin Harrison Jr., for what it's worth, is off the board. And the top 3 quarterbacks are off the board. I do believe that even though you have the likes of what feels like a future Hall of Famer and Joe Alt there, that pick doesn't make sense for the Giants. Their tackle situation is actually pretty damn good. Mm-hmm. So I do believe that the Giants, if staying put at 6, would end up pulling the trigger, putting in the card. Quarterback J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan will be their pick. I do think they like him for what it's worth. I don't know how much they truly value him at pick 6. I think it's one of those things where I think a team like the Vikings like JJ McCarthy a lot more than maybe the Giants do. Mm-hmm. And that's why I bring up, if the board were to break down the way it has, I could see them being the kind of let's make a deal for 11 and 20. Was it 23 or whatever it is with the Vikings? We'll give you pick 6 and however that needs to shake down, however it is, they can go get their guy. And then it feels like then the Giants could be in a decent spot at 11 to get other needs they may have. But overall, in this scenario, JJ McCarthy out of Michigan, the quarterback, is going to be the Giants guy, because at the end of the day, I do believe one thing and one thing only. The Giants are very, very, very done with Daniel Jones. They are absolutely done. Dayball, Shane, they are done. They understand the mistake that was giving him that extension. They can get out of it. I believe after this season, there's an out, and they will absolutely be doing that. So they want to get their next quarterback.
Yeah, he was not their guy. Now they kind of made him their guy when they gave him that extension, but I think they squeezed like every bit of juice out of that berry year one when they drug him to the playoffs, and he played pretty well, but a little bit of fool's gold there. I will just say this: if this board falls this way for the Giants in this world where Williams and May and Daniels are off the board, and then Harrison and Neighbors, what a spot for the Giants to trade back. You have what many presume to be the last, like, for sure first round talented quarterback in JJ McCarthy. So you have an arms race there between teams like the Raiders, the Vikings, potentially even the Broncos trying to get up there. You have one more blue chip wide receiver. I don't know why I'm trying to make a point and it keeps burping here. One more blue chip wide receiver in Roba Dunze, that the two receivers are gone. So you could have an arms race to get up there. Even a team like the Bills, if they want to get kooky, could go up there and get him. And sitting right behind the Giants is a team that everybody thinks is going to take the best tackle, generational tackle, in Joe Alt. So if Joe Alt is the apple of your eye, you better get in front of the Titans to do that. So the Giants are really sitting in the catbird seat where they probably could get a ransom from somebody for something. Or if they're just not in love with any of their picks, like if they're not in love with McCarthy, even move back a couple spots. Or, stick and pick and take a Dunze. But in this pick, they took JJ McCarthy, and I would expect that Daniel Jones will be the highest paid backup or just somebody they cut loose. I have not looked at his contract situation, but I'm assuming Shane wrote something in there where they can get out of it fairly decently. So that leaves the Tennessee Titans. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this pick. I already kind of teased it. New head coach, Brian Callahan, first season with the team. Luka, when we did our offensive prospect breakdown, I'm going to be taking Joe Alt with this pick. I'm not gonna like go too into this. Right now they have Andre Dillard and Dennis Daly as their left tackles of the past 2 years. Not going well. Nicholas Petit-Frere was a guy we liked in the draft, but like if he's the best tackle on your roster, and look, they went out and they did a very good job of building up the weapons around Will Levis. And when you look at the fact that they still have DeAndre Hopkins, and the offensive line situation just continues to be a mess for them. They did move on from Derrick Henry. They're not going to be taking a running back here, but they have a need for right tackle and left tackle. They also have a need for an edge rusher. They have nobody opposite Harold Landry, and then it's an inside linebacker. But again, you're not going to take an inside linebacker here. Why I love this pick. And Luka, I don't know if you would believe me when I say this, but I bet I can make you love Joe Alt even more than you already do.
Impossible.
When the Titans hired Brian Callahan, they also got Bill Callahan as their offensive coordinator. So not only is Joe Alt the best offensive tackle prospect, in your opinion, that we have seen in quite some time, he gets to go learn from what many think is the best offensive line coach in the sport. It's a perfect marriage. It's a no-brainer, and it's an absolute perfect spot where team need meets value. Lock it in. Joe Alt to the Titans.
Yeah, sign seal delivered. It's the pick that I believe you and I, if we were to, I mean, Caleb Williams being number one is even in this conversation right now, Josh, for me. If you were to ask me in the top 10, what's the one pick I would bet money on being absolutely sign seal delivered for that pick slot, I would actually put pick 7 Tennessee Joe Alt over even number 1 Caleb Williams.
Well, that's silly.
I would do
But
it. I would do it for value. For value, you can't bet Caleb Williams minus 5,000. Come on, that's ridiculous. All right, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Atlanta Falcons at number 8 are up, and the clock has started. They're going into their first year with Raheem Morris being their head coach. Atlanta's a weird one because it feels like, from what I've been reading, listening to, and understanding with Atlanta, They go and got Kirk Cousins at quarterback, right? That has happened. Their offense is something they've spent the last 3 first-round picks on. Bijan Robinson last year, I believe it was Drake London the year before, and then the
Kyle
greatest and
Pitts.
yeah, the greatest and yet not greatest tight end in the league, Kyle Pitts.
Yep, skill position players in the top 10 the last 3 years.
Yeah, it's incredible. They spent a lot on that. You bring in Raheem Morris, and it just feels like there's going to be a shift in philosophy. There's going to be an idea of where they want to go. And on top of it, their offensive side of the ball is actually in a great spot. Offensive line as well is not bad at all. I mean, they have probably one of, if not the best guard in Lindstrom in the league. He is phenomenal. You have Jake Matthews still at left tackle doing all right. I say all right. It's doing okay. But overall, their offense is fine. So you look at the defensive side of the ball, and right now, your outside linebacker situation, which they are going to run a 3-4 primarily out of with Raheem Morris, you are looking at Arnold Ebike and Lorenzo Carter as your outside linebackers / edge presence. You need to do something about that. you just do. If you want to try to do something that's very important, aka rush the passer in a very vulnerable division, you need an elite pass rusher. You need an elite edge, and there just so happens to be one in this draft. He's not your Myles Garrett type, but he's still a phenomenal athlete in his own right, and he will instantly make an impact in this league, especially on a team that needs it so bad in that position. Edge Dallas Turner out of Alabama. You will be an Atlanta Falcon in this scenario. I can see a world where Atlanta trades back. Again, it's dependent on, is JJ McCarthy still on the board? Who else is there? And if someone believes at 9 something could get interesting for like Roma Dunze, then you'd probably want to try to get to 8, because who knows what's going to happen with a pick that, luckily for you, Josh, you had to get the brunt of with pick 9. So at 8, Dallas Turner and from Alabama, because if the Falcons stay put, they absolutely need that dynamic edge presence.
I like the pick. I know there's a school of thought that they could go take another receiver, like a Dunzee's there. There's been some drafts where Neighbors is there. And my only thought on that is, you mentioned it. They took Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Bijan Robinson, top 10 position skill players. If you were to add another skill position player to that, now all of a sudden you have 4 guys on an offense. It sounds great. I mean, it sounds fantastic. Oh no, we have too many weapons, but you have to think forward. Do you want to give a second contract to all of these guys? And now you have premium picks used on guys who are kind of fighting with each other for the ball to prove they should be the one to get that second contract. And I don't know if that's how real team building works. I don't know that they have to be that aggressive to do that. It would be fun to watch. It'd be fun to see all those weapons together, but I could even see a world where if they were to pull the trigger on an Adinze here, maybe they trade Drake London over the weekend for like a second, or, a couple seconds or whatever. But they did not in this draft. They took Dallas Turner, who is my number 1 defensive player in this draft and the first defensive player off the board. And that puts us in another situation where I think we're starting a run of picks, Luka, where neither one of us believe these teams are going to be picking where they're on the clock. But here we go. The Bears are on the clock. They've already taken Caleb Williams, so they're feeling really good. Couldn't believe Caleb Williams fell to them first overall. The Bears really did hit a home run last year at the trade deadline, acquiring Montez Sweat. And I know a lot of people are like, why would you trade a second round pick for somebody you could have just signed as as an unrestricted free agent in the offseason? Well, excuse me. He wasn't going to go to Chicago. The Bears are a bad team. If you trade the pick for him, you secure his rights, and then you can negotiate with him throughout the season. That's what their thinking was. When you're a bad team and you have to do special things to get players there, we saw that with the Bills having to overpay various players, but they could still use a defensive end. I think there would have been a lot of consideration for Dallas Turner there. They could use a defensive tackle. Justin Jones is the Bear starter at 3 technique, but he left for Arizona, and the cupboard's a little bare there.
Heyo.
Ayo. And then interior offensive line, like they're looking at Ryan Bates being their starting center. That's not terrible. But then, Tevin Jenkins and Nate Davis are pretty solid at guard, but they could always use a little bit of a bolstering there. And I do think that there's going to be some lessons learned on how they didn't build around Justin Fields and how they do want to build around Caleb Williams. But the largest point I want you all to remember on the Bears when they're on the clock is they only have 4 picks in this draft. And this is a hot spot. to trade down. Dunze is still there. If a team really wants the last premium wide receiver, they're going to go up and get him. Luka, do we want to put our Bills caps on and talk about this, or are we kind of in the too rich right now?
I will say, I don't believe this to be too rich for the likes of Roma Dunze.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to have a little bit of a discussion here, we can, and then we can determine whether we want to actually pull that trigger or not.
Okay, let's do it. So you have the trade value chart in front of you. I have what's the trade? What's the guy's name? The Rich Hill's trade value chart in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
This pick by the Bears is worth 387 points on the Rich Hill trade value chart. And the Bills' 28th pick is worth 209 points. So if they were to package that and their second round pick, that would put them right around 297. They'd still be they'd still be about 100 points shy. So you're looking at probably sending could you do a 1, a 2? I don't want to do 2 1s and a 2. That's too rich for any wide receiver.
Yeah.
Could you get up there with a 1, a 2, the 2 you got from the Vikings, and maybe an additional pick or maybe a sweetener like a Kyer Elam, who is not going to carry a ton of value? Like, we understand that, but
yeah, I mean, Kyer Elam's carrying a value where it's like a 4th round pick. We, obviously like early to mid day 3 kind of pick. I don't know if the Bears are going after a Kyer Elam. I mean, that's an interesting point, but it's one of those ones where if you do, so you go and you got Minnesota's 2nd round pick. If you go 1-2 this year, 2 future next year for 9 overall, it's a little. So it's like the fan in me would pull that trigger.
mm-hmm.
Like if we were in a Madden league, Josh, and that was the situation on draft night in our Madden league, I would pull that trigger. I would do it. Do I believe Brandon Beane would pull that trigger? I think he would be tempted, but I don't believe he would do it. And the only reason I say that is because there's still a love for other players that will most likely be available later on in the draft, of course. And I just don't think that the gap is there as much as we think it is.
What does the value chart that you have in front of you say about a 1, a 2, and then a 2 next year? Because a 2 next year you have to value as like a 3 this year, basically.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if we did a 1, a 2, and a 2 next year, I mean, my chart says that the Bears win that trade very much overall. They would have to give something else, a little bit more of a sweetener on top for it to be of more equal value. So, for instance, if I were to do like, say, yeah, there you go. If I did, okay, so if we did a 1, a 2, and next year's 2 for a 1 and next year's 3, that would bring it a little bit closer. Or because I don't think the Bears they don't have any draft capital this year, right? They can't put a 5th round pick of this year on the draft because, well, they don't own one. And that's the whole point of them trying to move back in the first place. So overall, it becomes one of those situations where I think the Bears are going to be I think the Bears are going to be trying to not move back too far, or if they're moving back far enough, they're trying to acquire a boatload of picks. So I would be very curious on how that's going to operate exactly. And I just don't think Brandon Beane would pull that trigger.
I don't know if it's the lights being on, the show being on. I don't think for the sake of our show, we should do this pick. Okay. Like, I think we should just let the Bears make their pick, but I would do this in a heartbeat. And here's what I'm thinking. You get your number 1 and you're golden. You've lost your 2nd round pick this year. Go ahead and take Friday off. You have 10 picks on Saturday. 10 picks. Can Brandon Beane, who's done fantastic on day 3, find 3 or 4 useful players in 10 picks? Can he maneuver around the board? If somebody on day 2 starts falling, he can package those 2 4s and get up there and get somebody for sure. But the biggest key to all of this, you have a full bank of picks next year. You've taken a 2, but you already had 2 2s.
Yep.
and you should be getting some compensatory picks. So you haven't really touched your stock of draft picks last year. You've just kind of reorganized Stephon Diggs into allowing you to do this. It makes all the sense in the world to me. My
Yeah.
biggest fear is that the Bills get so aggressive that they end up costing themselves a future one. If you can get up to 9 and not cost yourself a future one, and all you do is take yourself out of Friday this year, and you have 10 picks on, or you have 9 picks on Saturday, I'm pulling the trigger. I'm
I
doing it.
I think my problem is I really don't know how you move from 28 to 9, even with these, calculators, even with the charts, right?
Yeah.
How are you moving up from 28 to 9 without a future first? How is that even possible? I can
It doesn't
understand
feel
it.
right.
It doesn't. It really doesn't feel right. Like 2 twos. I
This feels
mean,
like draft day where
yeah,
the guy's like, take all my 2s and I'll give me the 5th overall pick.
yeah.
Deal.
Yeah, it's like that's where I think these charts as well, for what it's worth, and
Hmm.
it's a good time to bring it up now, where these charts are a little skew and off, and it's where like us from the outside, it's one of those things where I think if the Bears got a call from Brandon Bean and Bean's like, hey, I'm at 28, right? And it's like, I'm at 28 and I want your pick at 9. I mean, the Bears would be like, okay. I mean, I need 3 more picks, if not more, 28 plus 2 more picks in this year's draft to make
Yes.
that even worth my while.
They are
Something of
light
that
this
nature.
year. They want
Right.
stuff this year.
Yeah, because all they have, just for this conversation's sake, this is gonna be a long episode. I just realized that. I forgot how
Mhm.
long this episode goes. So they have the 9th overall pick. They have the 75th, which is a third of this year, and the 122nd, a fourth this year. That is it. They don't have a second, they don't have a fifth, they don't have a sixth, and they don't have a seventh at all. So if, as I even said before, and then even just recently before, if Bean calls, they're going to be like, all right, we need 2 more picks on top of it in this year's draft to even make it worthwhile. So let's say a 1, a 2 this year, and then let's sprinkle in one of the 3/5 we have this year. And on top of that, you have to still do something else. So let's say it's a 1, a 2, a fifth, and that future, let's say a future third. I probably do it, but for the sake of our show, Josh,
I like the
um,
feeling of the 2 next year where you're not.
yeah,
Is everything okay?
you're breaking in and out. Hold on, let me
Oh,
mark that.
okay. I think my frames are coming back. Is it better?
Yeah, now you're good.
Okay. We'll just push through. It happens. It's kind of like a live recording. We're not going to make Luke go back and edit out 15 seconds of that. Okay. I like the idea of the 2 next year, and I do think that like you'll have to give multiple 2s. I think it would look like here's what I think it would settle on if the Bears are willing to do this. 28th pick, you give the Bears your 2 this year, you give them your 2 next year, and then like Lucas said, you throw in a few sweeteners on day 3. The Bills have 9 picks on day 3. Maybe you throw in a 5th, a 6th, and a 7th. Like, whatever allows them to feel better about this, whatever makes it that long where they turn the card into ESPN and it shows on the screen like the Bills give up 7 picks for Roma Dunze. You can make the conversation seem like they really got a steal. But if the value matches up and the Bears are willing, that's the other key part of this. Then I would do this. We are not doing this in this mock draft, but I think this was a good exercise. The Bears are going to stick and pick in our mock draft, and they are going to take Roma Dunze. They have DJ Moore, they have Keenan Allen, but there is one blue chip player left, in their opinion, at least at wide receiver, Roma Dunze. I want to say one more thing though. In a scenario where the Falcons would have taken wide receiver, I think the Bears are going to be in a very interesting situation. They could stick and pick and take Dallas Turner. If I'm the Bears in that spot, I'm taking Brock Bowers all day. In a world where the 3 receivers are off the board, the presence of Cole Kmet and Gerald Everett is not going to deter me from taking a generational tight end. We've been comping the world's been comping Caleb Williams to Patrick Mahomes all draft season. And now you get a chance to give Patrick Mahomes 2.0, the best tight end prospect we've seen since Kyle Pitts. Sign me up. If I'm the Bears, I do that and don't even look back. I don't think they would do that. I think Matt Eberflus and those guys, if the receivers are gone, would take Dallas Turner. Dallas Turner's gone. The Bears take Roma Dunze. That was a long time to be on the board. Good exercise. And now we're on to pick number 10 and the New York Jets.
Yeah. In this scenario, Jets are on the board, and I myself am very happy because Roma Dunze, if he is there at 10, the Jets are ready to turn in that card 1 second as soon as the clock starts. But they cannot. That is not the world we live in. And the Jets are in a situation, and I believe everything that's out there. There is way too much smoke about it being this is an all-in year for the Jets. This is everything they need to do. They go and get Tyron Smith on their left. They have Morgan Moses on their right. Is that going to be perfect for them for years to come? No. Is it good enough, especially for what they've had for this year? Yes. That should be good on their offensive line. They have to protect Aaron Rodgers as best as they possibly can. And hopefully they don't be teaching chop blocks or, trying to just go down early on the snap. Geez, it's remarkable, man, that was actually what they were trying to do for quick ball out, and 4 snaps in, he tears his Achilles. Anyways, protect Aaron Rodgers. They did that in free agency. Then what they have around him and everything of that is okay. Brees Hall in the backfield's great, of course. He should be hopefully going into this season after a healthy offseason and training camp. You have Garrett Wilson, of course, still. You signed Mike Williams to go opposite of Garrett Wilson. Your wide receivers feel okay. If you could have brought in a Roma Dunze, that would have been a hell of a wide receiver room, in my opinion, for even this year. Your defensive side is still fantastic. The one thing that can truly change the dynamic of the offense, though, is a tight end. And as we had just discussed, there is a dynamic tight end in this draft, a generational tight end potentially as a receiving weapon, and someone that should truly move the ticker for the Jets this year and even for years to come for whatever life is post Aaron Rodgers. But if you're trying to go all in, it's just the sweetener on top of trying to do what you can for Aaron Rodgers. Give him Brock Bowers out of Georgia, because when you have Brock Bowers with Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams, and you did what you can for your tackle positions with Morgan Moses and Tyron Smith for this year, that builds you a roster that truly feels like it should be competing for the division and should be competing in the playoffs come that time of year, as long as health is good moving forward. So yeah, Brock Bowers on the table there still at 10. You will be turning in that card if you are the Jets as quick as possible. You might be a little bit bummed out about Dunze being gone the pick before you, but overall you don't care because you feel great with Bowers becoming the next Jet.
It's funny you mentioned Morgan Moses and Tyron Smith for the Jets, because I think a lot of people hear that and they're like, well, so what? Like, you could still take a tackle of the future, but you hit the key point. They don't care about the future. They want to hit this Aaron Rodgers window. And if the Jets were to go out and get like a Troy Fatanu, and all of a sudden, like, maybe he's competing with Morgan Moses for playing time, or he's their third tackle or a guard, like that's not going to excite Aaron Rodgers as much as a generational tight end. The Jets are very much in a very unique window here. And I agree with you on the Brock Bowers pick. I also think that we mentioned the Bills trading up to a 9. I think a team like the Colts is very interesting, moving up to 9 to get ahead of the Jets to take Brock Bowers. I have a feeling he is the apple of the Colts' eye. But not so lucky for the Colts there. And number 11 on the clock is the Minnesota Vikings. And look, I firmly believe the Vikings will not be making this pick on draft day. I think that they will have already picked a quarterback. They will have already gone up and gotten their guy. Otherwise, I will be baffled why they got 2 first-round picks with seemingly no plan of actually moving up to get a quarterback. Unless they Joe Flacco'd this, where they're like, hey, we know this quarter, we're not going to be able to get one of the big 4, but we're going to get a late first-round pick. We can get a Bo Nix. We can get a Penix Jr., somebody like that, and then we'll take another position of need at pick 11. I don't want to throw off our mock draft here to the point where, like, now I'm like really reaching down the board for a quarterback just because I believe that's what the Vikings are going to do. So I'm going to live in a world where the Vikings acquired that second first round pick with the idea of, if we can't get one of the top 4, we'll take somebody at the back of the first round, like a Bo Nix or a Penix Jr., and then we'll address a more immediate need with pick 11. Don't think it's going to happen, but that's the world where I'm forced to live in without being able to trade. The Vikings have a need for a boundary cornerback, and I believe there are two players in this draft that have the argument to be the best defensive player in this draft. One is already off the board in Dallas Turner. The other one is going to be the pick for the Minnesota Vikings here, and that is going to be out of Toledo cornerback Quinion Mitchell. He is a prototype. He had a lot of experience in zone, off man coverage, went down to the Senior Bowl and was pressing everybody into the ground. He's a very exciting prospect. Heard Patrick Peterson comps. Let's take it easy. Let's take it easy. Like Patrick Peterson wasn't making it out of the top 10, but a very intriguing prospect in a draft that's light on blue chip defensive talent. And if this falls for the Vikings this way on draft day, I think he's a good consolation prize.
Yeah. Josh, just spoiler alert. I told you, before we recorded, if you go with all the options that I imagine you will go with your picks, with what I do is my exercises for everyone that understands. I list kind of 2 to 3 options at each pick that Josh is taking. So I think that's where it's going to go. So then I can make my judgment calls after that point. Quinion Mitchell was my number 1 at that spot. If the Minnesota Vikings are picking at 11, that pick made a ton of sense. Denver Broncos are on the clock at 12. Another team that I will say has eyes on quarterback. I mean, it makes a hell of a lot of sense. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out when your starting quarterback is Jarrett Stidham and you're one Jarrett Stidham injury away from Ben DiNucci being your starter right now. So quarterback will be an interesting position for the Broncos in this year's draft. We will see how they address it because they are officially in the post Russell Wilson era. So that is one thing in here. Do I believe that they would be taking a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix Jr. here? No. Spoiler alert. There's just feelings I have about those players and how it feels like teams evaluate them, everything like that. The Broncos, though, are kind of one of those places where could they go with Brian Thomas Jr.? The answer is no, although I will say Cortland Sutton, it's an interesting situation. It feels like where it's not as solidified. Maybe there could be movement there. Who knows? But I don't think that they would be taking Brian Thomas Jr. here anyways at 12, regardless of that situation. And then their defense, I will say, needs some work. They brought in Zach Allen last year in free agency, or was it this year? I don't know. It was recently Zach Allen from the Cardinals. Their defensive line, though, is tough. It's rough to look at. And then their outside linebackers are nothing special either. And it felt like there is just this fascination and need where I see a world. Now, I think the Broncos, for what it's worth, like Quinion Mitchell a lot. And I think if Quinion Mitchell's on the board here, that is their pick. But as I even said going into this, and the reason I said it was I projected that Josh would be taking Quinion Mitchell at 11 for the Vikings. If Quinion Mitchell is off the board at 11, the pick for the Denver Broncos will be edge Laiatu Latu out of UCLA. There are question marks about his neck and everything like that, but he seems to be one of the best pass rushers in this year's draft outside of that injury. And I believe the Denver Broncos truly miss having that kind of cornerstone-like edge presence. And therefore, with someone like him on the board, with the quarterbacks being in the situation that they are, and then the wide receivers, those top 3 guys being gone, and Quinion Mitchell on top of it, now also being gone, I will say, too, I do think the Broncos like Brock Bowers a lot as well.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, a lot of teams like Brock Bowers, though. Let's be quite frank on that one. But in this scenario with the Broncos staying at 12 and the board working out as it is, Laiatu Latu will be a Denver Bronco. And hopefully for his sake, the neck injury is not a problem. And they do find that true edge dominant cornerstone that can be, because he is a fun player to watch for what it's worth. So for Broncos fans, if that happens, I wish all the best for him because he is fun. And hopefully that is not a big issue.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of Jalen Phillips, where there's really no question on the player's talent. It's really about what kind of longevity he has. And I think the concern with Latu is he just really a one contract guy? And, Sean Payton, not necessarily the most like patient guy. He's willing to kind of bet it all on the now, So it would not surprise me at all for him to be like, okay, he might be a one contract guy, but for the next 5 years, I have a good pass rusher. Like this works out just fine. I gotta face Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert every year.
That's right.
And maybe the Raiders get up and they get a Jaden Daniels, they make a sweet pick, and all of a sudden you're like, I need to get this guy. It makes a lot of sense to me. All right. Well, the Raiders did not get Jaden Daniels. The Raiders are on the clock though at pick 13. I do think, Luka, that Jaden Daniels is the apple of their eye. He was coached at one point by Antonio Pierce. Antonio Pierce is the new head coach of the Raiders. He was their interim coach last year. Jimmy Garoppolo did not work out. The Raiders were married to Derek Carr for a long, long time. Never really got anywhere there. Had some decent statistical seasons, but I think Derek Carr kind of is who he is at this point in time. And the Raiders are in a division with Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and Sean Payton, and they have to find a way to score points consistently. I do believe they are going to do everything in their power to get Jaden Daniels. It's going to be tough. It didn't happen in our mock draft because it wasn't allowed. I don't think they have the ammunition to outbid a team like Minnesota to get up there. So I think they really need like the Commanders to pass on him and then Minnesota just not to like him. Too many things have to happen. I have a feeling, an educated feeling, that the Raiders have a consolation prize at the quarterback position that some would say picking him at 13 is a little too early. Others would say if you let him go and try to get back up into the end of the first round, you won't get him because his offensive coach from college is now the offensive coordinator in Seattle. And Geno Smith isn't getting any younger. And Seattle could absolutely take him. I think there's a lot of smoke around the Raiders being in on this guy. The Raiders have a history of kind of shocking the world on draft day. Obviously, it's a new regime here. But I think they want a quarterback. They're going to get a quarterback. It's not like there's just a great talented piece right now that's just staring them in the face. They could go offensive tackle, like they lost Jermaine Illuminor. I get that. But they like this quarterback a lot. I think there's a chance he's their quarterback 4. And the Raiders are going to pull the trigger on a guy that if he didn't have injury issues, I think would be in the conversation for quarterback 4 with JJ McCarthy and maybe even above him. The Raiders are going to go with Michael Penix Jr., the 5th quarterback off the board at pick 13. Want to reiterate, this is not what I would do. This is what I think the Raiders will do.
Boy, would that be something.
This is one of those I'm so happy we're live moments whenever the draft is going down and this happens, because that'll be a fun time.
You know what the Michael Penix Jr. pick would feel like too, especially going to the Raiders? It would feel like a classic Al Davis pick.
Yeah.
Even though it's not the classic Al Davis guy in the sense of like strongest arm in the draft, which is definitely what he was infatuated with in a quarterback. But overall, it does feel like, oh, I love this guy. I'm just going to take him. Even all the experts are saying that he's not even a first round guy, which I also believe he is not a first round talent. As much as I like him, I think the talent actually isn't the problem. I think it's glass knees is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, it's one of those things where if you're really trying to make it happen, yeah. I mean, you mentioned it. I think Jaden Daniels is kind of what they really would like in an ideal world. Pierce was someone on the coaching staff with Jaden Daniels in their time at ASU. Sadness. And it's just one of those things where that would make sense if they're sitting at 13 and then they end up taking Penix Jr. That is wild to me, especially with a board that is broken down the way that it has. And as we roll into it now, the New Orleans Saints are on the clock at 14. And the New Orleans Saints really just need one thing. If there was one repetitive theme when looking at the New Orleans Saints, when listening to everything, when just breaking it all down, Josh, there's one thing that they need, and that is left tackle, because Trevor Penning, who they drafted a couple years ago, is just quite not working out in the way that they would like. They're not. There's a lot of question marks if he's even going to be a left tackle in this league moving forward. It's shocking, and honestly, I'm a little surprised personally. I like Trevor Penning coming out of UNI a couple years ago. We talked about it. If you want to listen to it, our draft special 2 years ago, go have fun with that one. But overall, they want a tackle. They need a tackle. And if the draft board were to break down in the way that it has right here in front of us, they're going to take who I believe that they're going to take. And that is, in my opinion, the best pass blocking tackle that isn't Joe Alt in the draft. And that is offensive tackle Olu Fashanu out of Penn State. If he's still sitting there for the Saints at 14, I think they will be ecstatic. All my options, for what it's worth, were offensive tackles, and it's just going to be best offensive tackle available. They will be taking. So with the way this one has worked out, Olu Fashanu out of Penn State will be their new shiny tackle going into the next season.
What a good pick. What a monster pick. Like they've had some issues at tackle. Ramczyk, Penning, not necessarily going in great directions for a variety of reasons. And this is just a pick that makes all the sense in the world. I like Fashanu a lot. I think this is the kind of player that if Joe Alt wasn't in this draft, would be getting top 10 consideration. But this is just such a top heavy draft as it is with the receivers and the quarterbacks. This is a very smart Saints pick, and I would definitely applaud that. The Indianapolis Colts are on the clock at pick 15. I think there is a lot of smoke around the Colts trading up in this draft. I saw Peter Schrager say they trade up in the top 10 for Malik Neighbors. I don't see it. That's not in Chris Ballard's DNA. He's not a trade up in the first round guy. He's a trade back and stockpile picks kind of guy. I think if there's a player that the Colts would trade up for in this draft, it's Brock Bowers. Because you look at the fact they took Anthony Richardson last year. They want to make his job easier. They have good weapons with Michael Pittman and Josh Downs. Alec Pierce is not necessarily working out, but you add Brock Bowers to the mix, you can live with it. Brock Bowers is gone. If the Colts have their druthers about them, I think they would trade down right here. Luka, Buffalo Bills on the phone. Top 3 receivers are gone. Brian Thomas Jr., A.D. Mitchell, really any other receiver you want sitting there. Do we have the conversation, or is this too rich? Let's let the board fall a little bit more.
If the Colts are actively trying to trade back and they call Bean, if Bean called them obviously to express interest, that would be the only way that they would have called back. But overall, if that phone conversation does get returned, I could see it. Not to spoil what would be potentially on my eyes for the next pick in this draft. It is that sweet spot where I think in the next opportunity, we talked about it at length at 9. We're sitting here now at 15. And I do think this is kind of in that next window. I think 11, 12, 13, 14 is not quite that window there. I think those teams are going to take what they take. And I don't think that they're going to be fielding trade back opportunities there. I think the Raiders one is a true wild card, though, like you had even brought up. But if I am Bean and there's a phone conversation to be had with the Colts, sure, I would probably have that conversation. I don't think we need to have one at the length that we did at 9.
No.
But overall, what would it take?
Okay, so let's pretend we're Bean.
Yeah.
How many receivers are left that you covet? Not that you'd be comfortable taking at 28, but that you covet as like, I want this guy.
One.
Okay. Sitting between the Bills and when they pick, I count the Colts. These are teams that I think could be in the market for receiver. The Colts, the Jaguars, the Bengals, Steelers, and that's probably it. The Cardinals took a receiver already. Cowboys, sure, 5, and every team in the world behind the Bills, knowing the Bills are starting Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir if the season started today, and if they need to get a receiver, they want to get up in front of them. This, to me, is the exact spot that if you love Brian Thomas Jr., or if you're like Luka and you just view him as the last gotta have it guy, and then it's just now we're kind of at the buffet, what's your flavor that you like guy, this is the spot you got to get to, because after that you're holding your breath every pick. I don't think he's making it to 28. I really don't.
No.
So now it becomes a conversation of how much do you like him? Do you want to get greedy and see if he falls to 19 or 20, and maybe you don't have to give up an extra third or something? What does your trade value chart say about what this would be?
When I was doing it, for what it's worth, by the way, I was evaluating it at 16 with the Seahawks. in this scenario. So obviously comparable, very, very similar. If we were to move up to this area, it feels like what it would take is essentially a future 2 plus a late day 3 pick for this, and then also an exchange of another day 3 pick. That is kind of where you're at right now. So you essentially have to give up, say, that Vikings 2 plus a sixth to then receive this pick. And let's say I think I had it for the Seahawks. I had it also as like a sixth. Basically to swap the sixth for sixth was a weird one just to get the calculator right. So I feel like we're probably off a little bit there, but overall, yeah, you're essentially looking at 3 picks, one being the vital one, obviously being the next year's 2, to then move up to 16 and then also receive some other throw in there.
I'm going to let you be Brandon Beane in this conversation. I'm going to be Chris Ballard, and I'm going to be real with you. If I stick and pick, I'm taking Brian Thomas. What does that information do to you?
I mean, I don't think if I'm Beane, I feel like I would have to sweeten the pot more than what the charts are saying. That's bottom line. And overall, if I'm Brandon Beane and I believe that the Colts are taking Brian Thomas with this pick, so I need to do something to do it, I am not trading anything more than kind of that thought. Like, I would not do a 1, a 2, and a 2. That's insane. I wouldn't do, let's say, a 1, a 2, future 2, and then like yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing. Like, the weird part is that the Bills are in a situation where they don't have that third, and that becomes a little bit difficult because that if you had that third in your pocket and you had that day 2 still represented in that capacity, that it would make it more interesting. But overall, yeah, I don't see it making sense based on the charts, based on stuff like that, to move up this way to get Brian Thomas, fully understanding that, most likely Brian Thomas could be going here.
What's more precious to you, your 2 this year and maybe a little extra sweetener, or your 2 next year and maybe a very nice sweetener?
The 2 this year.
So you don't want to give up the 2 this year. All right. On the trade value chart, 209 for pick 28. I'm doing this on the fly, folks. Pick 28. I want a 4th round pick, your first one. That gets you an extra 19 points. That's not a ton. That gets you up to about 239. I'm going to take your 2 next year, which is worth about, we're just going to call it the middle of the 3rd round pick. We don't know. So that's another 55 points. So that gets you up to like 290. You're still a little bit shy of where I need to be. So we have a 1st, a 4th this year, a 2nd this year. I want Kyer Elam because I have a cornerback need. A 1st, a 4th, a 2nd next year, Kyer Elam, and a 4th next year.
Whew.
How's Justin Shorter looking in minicamp, Brandon?
Yeah,
I got a guy here that runs a 4.3 and he's 6'4" and he jumps out of the gym. So I mean,
yeah, it's one of those things where it truly does come down to I do like, I'm Brandon Beane right now. I do like Brian Thomas, but I do think that there's players that I also like where it's. I think the temptation's real. Now, pulling off my Brandon Beane hat, I think the temptation is very, very, very real there. My problem is, oh, man.
You want to hear my wild prediction? Just while you think about this, I want, because I think this, I know we said we weren't going to go long here, but I think this is kind of like a moment in this draft.
This is.
If the Bills take Brian Thomas Jr., he is a projection. Okay. He's not a hit the ground running, like instant number 1 target. And if he is, great, but I think there's a projection there. He's kind of like, you'll see what you have year 1, but you're also gambling on traits. We've seen the Bills do that a lot under Brandon Beane. They did it with Josh Allen. They did it with Greg Rousseau, who had very limited college snaps. They did it with Spencer Brown. They love traits. But that doesn't necessarily fill the void of like boundary receiver. I think the way Brandon Beane's mind works is if I get Brian Thomas Jr., I need to backfill this roster with a veteran that can come in and take the pressure off of him. This is not a name that's going to like make you super happy. Odell Beckham Jr. is a guy that could come in and play boundary receiver and be kind of that once Brian Thomas Jr. is better than him, he can play. He also went to LSU. That's not nothing to me. Those LSU guys, they are like brotherhood. So you're talking about an LSU mentor for Brian Thomas Jr. I think Brandon Beane, if he rolls the dice on Brian Thomas Jr., it won't be very long at all before he adds another veteran to that room. I don't think he wants to say, Brian Thomas Jr., you need to come in and be a starter from day one. I could be wrong, but I'm with you. The more I think about it, the more I think Brandon Beane loves this kid. He's everything Brandon Beane loves in a realistic world that doesn't make him sell the farm to get up and get one of the big three.
Yep. Yeah, I put going back to it. So, spoiler alert, at 16 is where I had the Bills trading up with the Seahawks to then go get Brian Thomas Jr. If we're going to have the conversation at 15, I don't think it changes. I think you're just dealing with the end user. I think that's the play. That's the move. As we've been saying, Brian Thomas Jr. is the kind of player that does seem to tickle the fancy of Brandon Beane in a lot of the right ways. And he checks a lot of boxes as well. I mean, in years past, Josh, Dalton Kincaid was the only one who really bucked the trend, it felt like. But overall, they like athletic freaks. They like them young, and they want them, they bring them in for a visit. I believe Brian Thomas checks the check mark of the visit, correct? I want to say he came in for a top
he was
30
here.
visit.
He was here.
Yeah, that's what I couldn't remember that for a fact, but I thought so. He is young. He's October 8th, 2002. So at the time of the draft, that put him at 21. He will be 22 during the season, but still young enough, under 23. That's the key there. And then, I mean, the athleticism just speaks for itself, right? Almost 6'3", if not 6'3" in the programs, over 200, yet still ran a 4.33. He is a freak of freaks. There is a raw element to him, but overall, I'm with you too. Like it's one of those things where if you do that, you are adding a veteran as well to reel it over and stuff. You don't want to put it all entirely on those massively broad shoulders of his right out the gate. And you want him to be comfortable as he then comes into this offense with Josh Allen and becomes hopefully that go-to guy for Josh Allen for years to come. I think it makes a lot of sense. Do I think the cost will be a little steep? Sure. But I don't think it's going to kind of the key as well is that Minnesota second, Josh. I think when that trade happened and we received Minnesota second, it almost felt as much of the writing was on the wall as it was with the Vikings acquiring that 23rd overall pick in this year's draft. Now, the best kept secret, or lack thereof for the Vikings is not the same for the Bills. It's truly an unknown on where the Bills are trying to go here and what is going on. But if the board were to break down the way it has, if we're sitting here in the mid-teens, in the mid part of this, and the Colts are willing to accept an offer for 15 to allow the Bills to move up all the way from 28 to get that done, what a night we're going to be having, Josh, if that world happens and this happens, because I think Brian Thomas Jr. is truly kind of one of those guys where do I not like AD Mitchell? Do I not like Xavier Worthy and stuff like that? Like there are other receivers I like a lot in this year's draft, but Brian Thomas Jr. is the gap, right? There's him and then there's a gap. And that's what I believe Brandon Beane will also be looking at. I don't buy this smoke where I think it was even in Peter Schrager's mock that he had the Bills at 28 taking AD Mitchell. It just AD Mitchell doesn't feel like the type of player that has that first round grade to Brandon Beane. And overall, What we're talking about here is we understand that wide receiver is going to be a big thing. Now, for whatever it's worth, Brandon Beane tried to kind of cool down the we are needing a wide receiver talk with the media this past week. And it's one of those things where I think he's just trying to calm the storm so it doesn't, become like Minnesota, the worst kept secret. But overall, we know that Brandon Beane likes to be aggressive for his first round grade guys. And he is going to want a wide receiver because it also feels like you're not doing Josh Allen justice if you don't try to do something about the wide receiver room with where it's at right now. And Brian Thomas Jr. sitting there in the teens, and you just got to do something. That itch is going to be there for Beane, and we just got to make this happen.
So I'm trying to make the value make sense. The Colts, in what we discussed, would not be getting a lot this year outside of 28. Like they'd be getting some filler stuff. What if Ballard says, how can we work out where we get 60 from you? I have a little bit of something jotted down here. So the Bills sending 28 and 60 on the Rich Hill chart, which is okay. The Rich Hill chart puts them right around 209, blah, 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 right around 300. We'll just call it 300 just to make it easy math. And the Colts first round pick is 15 or 315. So they're still losing on that trade. It could be as simple as your first, your second, and Kyer Elam. I would probably do that. I feel like the Colts might want more. If you think Kyer Elam is, well, that makes Kyer Elam like a 6th round pick. I thought about trying to squeeze the Colts 3rd out of him, but that's 54 points. That kind of lops it in the Bills. And then you just load them up with some day 3 picks if it's really that important to you. Is it worth it to you in a world where I don't want to get in the minutia, like the big hitters of this trade. Would you be willing to give up your first and your second and whatever else sweeteners go into it to get Brian Thomas Jr.?
Yeah,
I would too. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yep. All right.
I'm going to tell you something, Brandon Beane. You were smart because one, Brian Thomas Jr. was coming off the board here to the Colts. As the kids would say, dead ass. I like that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And then at 17, I had the Jaguars taking A.D. Mitchell.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
They need a receiver. This is my wild prediction for the draft. I think the Jaguars have A.D. Mitchell rated ahead of Brian Thomas Jr. I think they're the team that Schefter's been referencing as being higher on A.D. Mitchell. When you think about what they have in their wide receiver group, you have Christian Kirk, you have Zay Jones, and they spent the money on Gabe Davis. We've talked about Brian Thomas Jr. skills, like what he's good at, is kind of redundant with Gabe Davis Jr. Now look, Gabe Davis Jr. Gabe Davis. Brian Thomas Jr. is a far superior athlete than Gabe Davis. But when you talk about the ability to stretch the field, the limited route tree, inconsistent hands, like that's Gabe Davis to a T. So you're going to have 2 of those guys on the field. I think what the Jaguars need is somebody that can be more of that that traditional route running type. And I think A.D. Mitchell at least has shown that agility to be that. Plus, let's not sugarcoat. The Jaguars don't make the smartest decisions in the world. I just have this funny suspicion they wind up with A.D. Mitchell on draft day. And that means by the time 17 picks were done, the Bills would be left with, are we going to be taking Ladd McConkey at 28, basically? Or, Xavier Worthy.
Yeah. Which, by the way, Xavier Worthy at 24 with the Cowboys. Set it in stone.
Really?
Set it in stone.
Go on.
Yeah. There is something with the Dallas Cowboys that I just can't shake. And they have a lot of things where, for instance, here, because I wasn't ready to get there yet, just in case we were going to get there. I'm going to pull up their depth and whatnot. But when you look at the depth, before I discuss, what you hear and stuff like that, it doesn't make sense because you have CeeDee Lamb, you have Brandon Cooks, who is serviceable definitely for them. Funny enough, Martavis Bryant is on their roster, Josh. What a name.
What year is this?
Yeah. So wide receiver doesn't scream like that's where they should be going. Then you look at, not that there's a running back worth taking in the first round, but it's Rico Dwaddle, Deuce Vaughn, and then the recently signed Royce Freeman resurgence here in their backfield. Again, there's not a quarter running back worth taking, but that's a position that I think the Cowboys are going to be highlighted with a keen eye on day 2 to see if they can get someone that will battle with Rico Dowdle and all inevitably or Dowdle and inevitably take over for him. They could go a lot of different ways, but I just think from reading a little bit of the tea leaves and understanding what's going on with the Cowboys, I think when they signed Brandon Cooks last year and they brought him in or traded for him, however, whenever they brought in Brandon Cooks, what they envisioned from Brandon Cooks, I don't think it's enough. And you're not getting it consistently or anything at all from the rest of the crew when it comes to Jalen Tolbert, Martavis Bryant, as I mentioned, Kavonte Turpin, their return specialist. It feels like they want someone that's a more consistent field stretcher. And unfortunately, Brandon Cooks is just not at that point anymore where he's doing it on a regular occurrence and reliable. Fast forward, I think there's something about Xavier Worthy that is the intrigue factor with Jerry Jones. And when he is quoted saying that this is an all-in type of year, which I said before we start recording, I do believe a lot of the talk that's been out there where it's the all-in is not your traditional sense, like the Aaron Rodgers led Jets, where you just do everything you can. You're focused on this year. You draft Brock Bowers because you just need another weapon for this year. You're dealing with the veteran tackles you have, so on and so forth, who you brought in. I think the Cowboys are truly in an all-in year where they're going to try to maybe deal with what they have on the roster, and Dak Prescott especially, where they're not going to extend Dak Prescott, which seems insane considering what they could do for their cap if they were to do something like that. And overall, they're going to draft a Xavier Worthy to truly give him a lot of weapons, or another weapon at least, and do something with the running back position in day 2 to add to that after why am I blanking on his name right now, that left and went to can't remember. Anyways, fix the running back situation. And I just think Jerry Jones loves Xavier Worthy to the point where this is the all-in, going to give Dak that guy. And if it doesn't work out, see you later, Dak. We're not going to pay you, which also seems crazy to say out loud. And overall, evaluate things from there moving forward, where if you bring in another quarterback of a different variety, you then do still have the money tied into CeeDee Lamb. You have a Xavier Worthy who seems exciting as all hell and is a Texas guy, and see where you go from there. So Xavier Worthy at 24 to the Cowboys, man, it just feels right, even if it doesn't make sense.
For those of you who listen to our podcast, I just did something very fun on Twitter. I posted a GIF of Brian Thomas Jr. with a cryptic emoji that has a smiley face. The reason I'm doing that is because he was our pick in the mock draft, but folks on Twitter on draft week are going to assume that we have inside information. We do not.
It's horrible.
But those of you that are listening can be in on the joke. And we'll see if this gets crazy blown up, or we'll see if, I was going to do like the eyes, or like but that's too much. That's like trying to be one of those like Twitter insiders. This I can at least justify as like, this was our pick. I don't want to be that guy that like tries to get attention. And I'm openly admitting it on our show. We don't have any inside scoop other than he was a top 30 visit and, some common knowledge we have about what the Bills like to do in the draft.
Right.
Okay. Had the Bills stuck at 28, Luka, we're not going to, we're going to stop at the Bills picks. We're going to stop 15 picks in. Had the Bills stuck and picked at 28 in this scenario, Brian Thomas Jr. and A.D. Mitchell would be off the board. Let's assume the rest of the receivers outside of Xavier Worthy are sitting there. Would you consider Xavier Worthy for the Bills if you're wrong about the Cowboys, or what would be your next receiver, or would you pivot to a different group?
So you're saying in a world, Brian Thomas goes to the Colts, A.D. Mitchell goes to the Jags, say the Cowboys don't take Xavier Worthy. I don't think the Bills would take Xavier Worthy. I don't think that is what they would be looking for. I mean, in all reality, if the Bills are at 28, I think trade down is more so what they're going to be doing. If they sit at 28, depending on how the board breaks down, man, it's almost like staying at 28 and picking is the thing that least makes sense for the Bills,
Mm-hmm.
because who you would be taking in that situation, I just don't know if it makes sense in any capacity. I can see a Kool-Aid McKinstry. Maybe. I wouldn't take Lad McConkey. Like, I know you brought him up earlier. I wouldn't take a Bo Nix. Just kidding. Tongue in cheek.
Well, you wouldn't. I don't think we can. Brandon
Yeah.
Bean will not take. Well, we already
Yeah.
have our first question. Got some inside info.
Yeah. It's one of those things
Great.
where what you have there is Troy Franklin, let's say, or Jordan Morgan, the tackle from University of Arizona, Jackson Powers Johnson potentially, being there. It's the center from Oregon. It's just all those picks where I'm not saying it because it's not sexy, we'll call it that, but overall, those just don't feel like Brandon Bean first round grade guys. And Brandon Bean truly, if we understand Brandon Bean the way that we do, he is not going to draft a guy just for the sake of drafting a guy. If he doesn't have a first round grade on him, he will not be taking him in the first round.
Right.
He will trust his board, he will trust his information, he will trust his team, and just move accordingly how it needs to be. So if the Bills are at 28 with how the board seems to be in the way that it is, the only guy, let's put it this way, the last guy I believe is a Brandon Bean first round grade guy
I bet we have the same name. I'm so excited for this.
is Jared Verse, the edge out of Florida State.
We don't have the same guy. I was thinking wide receiver.
Oh,
Okay.
At wide receiver, first round grade is Brian Thomas Jr. That's the last first round grade. I
That's
don't
it
think
for you. Like,
yeah.
is
I
the
genuinely believe no.
so in this scenario, is the wide receiver at 28 thing dead to you, or
Yes.
are you just like, are you okay with a reach if they? You're
Nope.
never okay with a reach, are you? Like, never.
Nope. Never.
Okay.
Never ever. If you get caught reaching, you will die. Like that is you do not reach. You just don't do it. It too often do you see teams reach for positional need, and these picks don't necessarily flame out. The problem is when you reach, you put yourself in a situation where a board just seems to always not work out in a way you need it to. And overall, if you do not reach and you take BPA and or move back how you should, whatever it is, it will work out in the end for you because you will still be able to find guys at which you value at where you took them, and things shuffle the way it needs to. You need to trust your evaluation process. You need to trust your grading and just move accordingly based on that. So either you do like what we've done here tonight and you move up aggressively, you go get that last guy you have the first round grade on that is also a positional need, and or you sit where it is / move back because your board has broken down in a way where either this is your last first round grade guy, so because I'm at 28 and he's there, we're going to take him, or we're moving back. We'll take whatever we can get, allow another team to slide in late into the first to take a Bo Nix, to take, in our scenario, you said AD Mitchell at 17 to the Jags, so I'm not going to include him, but say Xavier Worthy wasn't taken by the Cowboys, take him. Take a Lad McConkey if someone thinks that they won't be able to get them early day 2, so on and so forth. It's guys like that. That's where I think that really goes.
For me, I would take Xavier Legette. I like him a lot. Boy, oh boy, do the guys who are connected to the draft process that set their boards, like Dane Brugler, Mel Kiper, like when they set their draft boards, Daniel Jeremiah, they're doing it based on who they think is good. But spoiler alert, they're also doing it because they're connected to these teams. They don't like to be wrong. And the teams know this. So, like, if, example, let's say Brandon Bean says, hey, by the way, we're going to take, tells Adam Schefter, by the way, not Adam Schefter, we're going to, Mel Kiper, we're going to take Roman Wilson with the 28th pick. Just so you know, like he's wide receiver 2 for us. You could do us a big solid by bumping him up in your ranking, so it's a little bit more palatable on draft day when we take him. Like, hey, Mel Kiper had him as number 26. And then Mel Kiper looks like a genius because he had him at 26 when Matt Miller had him at 60. And he's like, no, I told you 26. It works both ways. It's relationships. It's the grimy part of all this, but it's exactly how it works. These
Yep.
guys, are they watching film? Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's more so about information. And that's why when I see everybody having Xavier Legette in the third round of their rankings, to me, that tells me that they're not hearing any buzz about him in the first round. That is not the same thing as Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey is all over the first round rankings, back into the first round rankings. And he's a guy that Josh Allen called out specifically on the Jordan Palmer podcast. I do think there's a chance that the Bills could really like Ladd McConkey. And we've heard that he's been in for they've done some work on his medicals. That's absolutely not anything unique. You're going to do work on every player's medicals, but I think Ladd McConkey's somebody that could be a good consolation prize for the Bills. And that to me would be like okay, at pick 28, you didn't give up anything. You stuck at pick 28. And I think Ladd McConkey's somebody who's going to stick around the league for a while. Is he ever going to be a wide receiver one? I don't know. I mean, who knows? Who knew Puka Nacua was going to look as good as he did? But I think he's absolutely like, if he turns out to be Emmanuel Sanders, right? Like that's a hell of a career as like a high end number 2 the rest of his career. But I want to shoot a little higher. It's draft day. You want to dream about drafting somebody to go catch those bombs from Josh Allen. All right, Luka, this is the last time we're going to be on the air until draft night. Any final thoughts? Anything Bills related you want to get off your chest before we wrap it up?
I am so excited for draft night when we'll be live on air. Just because it feels I'm setting myself up, and I think we are setting ourselves up to be massively disappointed. Not to get negative on this, but it just feels like there's gonna be something. There's gonna be fireworks. It all cooks up that way. I will say on your Xavier Legette thing, I saw something where someone, I can't remember where I saw it, but they were like, I know it was in Mel Kiper's mock too, but Xavier Legette 32 to the Chiefs, and someone kind of explained why they saw that. I'm like, man, can we not do that? Like, can we not hand this raw, but yet seems like could work out in the right situation guy to then Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, please? Like, can we not? But overall, yeah, very excited for Thursday night. I hope what we did here, trading up to 15 to get Brian Thomas Jr., almost looks like it was minuscule. I will say my favorite option, just for anyone out there that's still listening at 1 hour 37 minutes into this, my favorite option is trading up for Roma Dunze. That is sell the house. Don't care. Get me Rome, because I believe he can be a true cornerstone with a guy like Josh Allen. That is my absolute preference, but I will still be over the moon if it's Brian Thomas, and I will accept nothing less. So it will be disappointment if we do not get one of those two, or Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., just to put it out there. But overall, it will be disappointment come Thursday night if one of those guys are not a Buffalo Bill by the night's end.
In a magical world where the Bills get up to 9 and Roma Dunze and Malik Neighbors are still available, who would you pick?
My big board tells me Malik Neighbors. My heart tells me Roma Dunze.
My gut tells me Roma Dunze. My belief that Joe Biscaglia is the most plugged in Bills beat reporter that there is tells me Malik Neighbors by a long shot. Joe Biscaglia believes that there is a absolute love affair between the Bills and Malik Neighbors.
See, and it's funny too, because I hear that. So you hear that, right? And you even mentioned earlier in the show, LSU receivers, it's a cult, it's a connection, it's a brotherhood. There's a love affair with the Bills and Malik Neighbors, and that tells me they watch a lot of LSU tape, and they watch a lot, and they scout LSU like crazy. That also tells me that they've watched a lot of tape of Brian Thomas Jr. as well, because you can't watch the one without the other. That's just the bottom line. They are going to be on the same film all the time. And therefore, I believe they understand and see what they see with Brian Thomas Jr. And I imagine they also love that as well. Because if you're liking the tape that you're watching with Malik Neighbors, you're probably also not minding that guy wearing number 11 over there. And yeah, that's all I'll say on that.
Final thought: if you can get up to Roma Dunze without giving up your one next year, do it.
Oh yeah,
do it.
Do it. Signed, sealed, delivered. How you doing?
This team, this team has been so good now for so long that they have missed out on the blue chip talent. You had a chance to get a blue chip talent without really hurting your bounty of picks you have. What are we talking about? The 60th pick on day 2. Do you guys realize we're going to be sitting here? It happens every year. Every year you're doing these mock drafts. You're thinking, oh my God, in the second round, we can get X, Y, and Z. And then the Bills will go off the board and take like some defensive tackle you weren't even thinking about. And then you're like, well, wait a minute. I would have rather had Roma Dunze than this guy. But, the picks are only valuable until they're taken. And then you have a name to it and you're like, oh, God, I wasn't willing to give this up for Roma Dunze. That kind of stings. Go get him if you can. If he falls to 9, I want the Bills to be aggressive, not reckless, but aggressive. I don't want them to give up their 1 next year. I think there is a path for the Bills to regress a little bit next year, potentially, and maybe not even make the playoffs. I think there's a world where that exists. I'm not predicting it, but I think the world exists. I'd protect that 1. But if you have to give up both 2s, you have to give up a 2 this year and a 2 next year and some sweeteners on day 3, do it. Do it. You have enough picks. And as you can tell by the tone of this episode, Luka and I are very much in favor of getting one of the blue chip receivers. And we hope the Bills did. And Brian Thomas Jr., who we have both agreed on, is in that second tier. And Luka definitely has him comfortably in that second tier by himself. This was our favorite episode of the year. The Bills come away with Brian Thomas Jr. with the 15th overall pick. We will see you Thursday night on Bills Chat YouTube for all the picks of the NFL draft. If you want someone to just feel like you're watching the draft with, we're there for you. Our guy Stokes will be with us. And love this whole format here, Luka, us being on with the draft. And then we'll be back next Monday to break down everything the Bills did on draft weekend. For Luka, I am Josh McCarty. We will see you on draft night. It's almost here. See you next time on Bills Chat.